Hi, everybody. Let me change my camera view. Today's going to be a daily review video. It's going to be really short, but it's going to be basically about doing watercolor. So let me make myself a little bit bigger. Nope, that's too big. Sorry. Okay, so what we're working on today is watercolor and demonstrating watercolor. So we're doing the background. This is basically kind of how, ooh, my paper just totally bled everywhere. Okay, we'll make that work. So as you could tell, I was doing it in fifth and sixth period, so things got a little crazy. Let's just take a little bit of water and blend this out so it's not as like obvious later on when we cover it up. So don't forget, guys, watercolor is very forgiving. It's very, very forgiving. So you want to make sure that basically your water is pretty much clean when you're starting this. So I'm going to soak some of this up a little bit. Sorry, it's going to take forever to dry. Blend it out a little bit with my brush. Watercolor can be very, very, very forgiving. So don't let it be too scary. This is kind of a clouding effect that we're kind of going for basically my project. What we're doing is basically a wet on dry technique and a wet on wet technique. So what that means is that either I'm painting with a wet brush on dry paper or I'm painting with a wet brush on wet paper. So what we're really going to focus on is, I'm going to have to pause this for a second. 1 second. Oh, I guess it's not working. So we need to make sure that our paint water is clear before we start. Mine is not, and my brush is not clean. So I'm going to go clean it out in the sink. So just give me a second. So sorry, I was not prepared. Always come prepared for class. So this is basically the work I've been doing over the course of today, but I've been doing it in literally like 3 or 4 classes. So I've got a little bit more done. If you're not this far along in your project, that is totally fine. But you want to start with first identifying your color harmony. My color harmony for this particular project, I will be showing you two. This is an analogous color harmony with 3 colors. It's going to be blue, blue, violet, and violet. Blue being my primary color, violet being my secondary color, and blue violet being my tertiary color. You need to have one of each for this technique for this particular assignment. There are other assignments. I have one that's going on right here. It's also called a triadic color harmony, to where the colors are not blending together to create a 4th color. So I will be showing this to you shortly in just a minute. I wanted to briefly go with you over the application of this type of technique that I'm going for. So there's several different techniques. You could do a wash technique like it's similar to in here, to where the water, the paper is not too wet when you're blending the color. If you really want a kind of depth to your paper and you want it to really kind of build and flow, you're going to really let the colors blend together and really get kind of puddly. You're going to have more water on your paper. So what you're going to need to be successful is this. You're going to need a palette. Some of you have a single palette that doesn't have glitter. Sorry, it's the only one I have available with me right now. It's going to be a regular palette with no glitter. It's going to basically look like just basically this side of the watercolor palette. I'm only going to be focusing on using colors that are on the color wheel. That is also available in your palette as well. You're going to need a fresh, clean cup of water, and you're going to need a brush. Now, some of you guys are using colored pencil or crayon or another type of technique. You could still use these. You just want to make sure that you're not blending or lapping your colors. If you're going for something that's a triadic color harmony, to where you can only use 3, not create a 4th or 5th color. Because what do you get when you mix yellow and orange together? Or sorry, yellow and red together? I just said it. You get orange. So it's the same type of technique on that other technique, which we'll get to in a little bit. You can use this in basically a similar style if you're using acrylic or you're using oil. You do not want to use water in those paints, but if you want, you can layer on each color. You just want to let the layering dry before you add an additional layer to it. Do not use water in anything other than watercolor for this assignment until you learn how to manipulate it and use it. If you decide you want to get creative and artistic and try it later, I will say this: water and oil do not mix. Don't use water with oil. But I have seen some people use water with acrylic and it came out pretty fascinating. But we're not doing that for this technique. So I just want to briefly go over this with you guys so I don't take up the entire amount of your time. But I wanted to show you what we have been working on in class. So first, you want to start with your background. Don't even focus on basically who your person is. My particular icon that I'm using for this piece is John Lennon. I'm going for a little bit of a darker background, so I might not use black to outline my figure later on. I might use white. I'm going to do a sample swatch and see which one I like a little bit later. But first, we want to start with completing basically the background. Now, I used a little bit of a red purple in here, so I had to go back in with a little bit more blue to get that really kind of bubbly effect, but I really kind of like how it's looking because I want the effect of clouds. So what I'm really focusing on is using what's called a wet on wet technique, where I'm going to get my paper wet first before I apply my color. Now, you want to let all of your previous color dry completely before doing this technique, or you can get some additional blending that you're not looking into. So I'm probably going to be very careful of my areas here and here and a little bit over here because these are still a little bit wet. So I'm going to probably try to bridge the gap, sorry, in this middle area here. So you want to make sure you get a clean brush. If your brush looks like this, you might want to go to the sink and like check it out first. You can also use a palette over here to just add a little bit of water to it to see if it turns up a different color. If that color is not clear, you're going to need to go rinse out your brush and clean your water a little bit more. So that being said, I'm going to take my brush, and you can use a different size brush if you have one that's wider, if you want to cover more of an area, like if you have, say, like a larger canvas. But I'm only using an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, so I should be fine. So you want to use your brush, dip it into your watercolor or into your water, and you want to saturate the area in which you want your watercolor to go. If you want the whole thing to be covered, you're going to paint the whole thing with water first with the wide brush and then put the color on it. But I really want to strategically place this color in only certain areas. So I'm going to go for basically kind of an effect where you can see where the light shines on it. Now, where I put the color onto that water is where my color is going to actually blend. And I'm going to start with a little bit of a violet since I have a lot of blue in this area. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to dip it into my violet color to where I get a pretty good saturation. This palette's pretty good in the fact that it puts a lot of color on your palette, from your palette to your brush. If you're not getting that nice color saturation on your palette and your palettes are kind of dry, you're going to have to swirl it around in there to get a lot more color. So as I'm placing it, you'll see how it will blend out. See if I can focus a little bit more. There we go. Where I put it. Now, if you like that effect, you can literally just dab it and just let it go. Now, as you're using color, you could swirl it around and really get that kind of effect if you have more water on the paper than you do anything else. If you don't like that harsh edge or that border, all you need to do is put your water brush or your paintbrush into your water, really get as much paint off as possible, and then take this water and then place it around where you want that color to blend. This is also a way for you to blend it out to a nicer, lighter color. If you're going for something more of a transition, say like you would with value shading. And there's no right or wrong way to do this technique. You just place it wherever you feel like putting it. Just literally get it in. The more paint you add to it, the more of this kind of like bubbly effect you're going to get that's going to end up appearing to be like clouds. So what you want to do is you just want to make sure that this is going to be left flat when you let it dry, so that it doesn't run streaks like this one did here. So say for example, I did paint a little bit of color on here, but I let it dry, so it's not bleeding as much as I would like it to. So just go back in, add some more color to it, or add some more water to it. Where you place that water is where that color is going to stop, unless you tilt it one way or the other to get gravity to force that water down. So now I've got a really nice mixture of like blue and some purples, right? And I want to go a little bit into maybe a blue purple here. Or a blue, it's not a blue purple. Sorry, guys. I'm not using correct academic vocabulary. It's a blue violet. So this is where your palette side is going to come in. So what you want to do is you want to dip your paintbrush into color and then put some on the palette. You're going to take it back in. Sorry, let me move this over. You're going to take it back in and you're going to clean out your brush as much as possible and then dip it into the blue and then mix that into your palette until you get a desired color that you're looking for. So then you can compare it. If you want, what I like to do is to have a test piece of paper, like a blank piece of paper, and I can just use it as a swatch. I'm liking that color. It's very blue. It has a nice blue and a little bit of violet in it. So I'm going to use that, and I'm going to put that over here. So I'm going to take a little bit of water. Obviously, my water is not clean because you can tell that it's got a lot of color. But since I can kind of get away with it within a color, analogous color harmony because of the fact that I have the colors blended together. If you have more water on your paper than you do color, it's going to be a very light color. So what you want to do is you want to rinse it out. Oop, I'll put that over here. Then you want to pinch it dry. Pinch, 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 pinch. Do not twist your brush. You'll ruin the bristles that way. Then pick up more color, and then it should appear to be a little bit more of a darker color. Just let it dry. Ooh, my mom's calling me. Once this is dried, you'll get this really nice layering effect. So now that I have this here, I do feel like this is a little bit bright over here. I'm going to use a little bit of this blue color and just spread it around. Watercolor, guys, can be very, very forgiving. If you're not liking the way it looks, let it dry and then come back to it later. Because as you can see, with this color being very, very dark, it's much darker when it's wet than it is when it's dry. So take your paper and you're going to want to put it someplace flat so you can make sure that the watercolor does not blend together. So I'm going to take my water and I'm going to go rinse it out and I'll be back. So now we've got this beautiful bad boy right here. This is something we started a little bit earlier. Now, if you're doing a triadic color harmony to where you don't want the colors to mix together, because once they mix together, they start to overlap. Like I dropped a little bit of blue right here, so it's turning a tinge of yellow, yellowy green. But if you let it dry and you try to like paint over it, you might be able to pull off a blue if you really saturate that one spot. That's why it looks a little, it's supposed to be yellow right there, but we'll just ignore that. So I want to make sure that all of my areas before I add any additional color are going to be dry completely. So if you want to, you could really kind of go in and start placing color in certain areas that are spaced out and leaving basically a white area of dry paper in between. So make sure you have a nice clean color. Nice clean color on your basically your paper. And sorry, nice clean color in your water, as I should say. And then place the water on the paper where you want your next color to go. I'm going to go with a red over here because I like the alternating, but I don't have a lot of red on my paper yet. So just put it where you see this nice shininess, right? Where do you see the shine? You'll need to tilt your paper because it might be difficult to see where you want it to place, and you might have to get close enough to see it. Then you're going to go in and really dig in and get your red. And just place it and just let it go. Like, be Elsa for a minute. Just let it go and really kind of get in there and play with it. Do you want it to be darker? Do you want it to be lighter? Do you want to just let it go? If you're thinking that's too dark and you would like a transition, get in there with some fresh water and blend it out. Really make sure you get the paintbrush super clean with clean water. And you can get this really nice kind of blending effect in there, right? And then you can go back, and if you don't like the displacement of your color, you can blend it out and let it dry. Go back in and maybe add a little bit of red. I'm going to have some red down here. As you can see, the paper is a little bit of a red color. Now, try to make sure it doesn't get too close to the blue, because this is what will happen. Once you add the red, it's going to bleed. Spreads out like a wash. And then I can't control how much of it is overlapping into the blue if I'm not paying attention to where I'm going with my red. So this is where you're going to go on what's called a wet on dry technique. So I'm liking how this is coming out. I'm digging it, right? This blue is dry right here. You can just take your finger and touch it. Then I want to go in and get my brush nice and clean and probably take a little bit of the water out of it and pick up a really nice heavy amount of red. So I'm going to go in and I'm just going to edge with my brush the outline area of where my red is at, or where the blue is at, where I wanted to go to the red, right? And you're thinking to yourself, oh, this is way too dark. Go back in, pick up some more water, just water, and blend it out. And if you're like, oh, that's not red enough, go back in, pick up a little more red, put it where you see the water. Just blend it out. But do you see how over here it starts to blend into a purple because of the fact that I put my water over the blue and I wasn't controlling it as much as I was up here? So I'm going to blend this red together. I like how this is looking. I'm going to use a wet on dry technique to where I don't have water on my paper before. And I'm going to try to edge this blue. Right? Turn your paper around if you want more control. Try not to overlap it as much as you can. You might need to really get a very, very nice dry brush for this. Just let it puddle in some areas and just let it breathe out. So I don't want the yellow and I don't want the red to overlap. So I can go in with this red and really control my placement of red as I'm working through it. So I really want the red to go all the way up to the yellow without really over pouring into any other section. Because that water will stop where the paper turns dry, and it really will stop as long as you're keeping your paper completely flat. Ta-da! Cha-cha! I want to go really dark in here. Sorry, I'm in a little bit of a rush. I know I shouldn't rush this, but just blend it out. Now, when you're getting close to the edge, I wouldn't recommend going in with too much water. If you want to just blend it out in larger areas, that's fine. Let it dry. Let it dry flat, and you can get some really nice kind of psychedelic colors. I'll probably come in with some more blue and some more yellow until this whole thing is done. But this is how you can do some type of abstract water technique and not blend your colors together. You just want to make sure that each section is dry first before you add another one. You could do a swirling technique. It's just that once you start getting into where they start to overlap, you start changing colors. If they're just a little bit here and there and you can't really control the blending, I understand. But if you just get in there and just mix the whole thing together and you get like 5 or 6 different colors, it's not adhering to the grading rubric of the assignment. So that being said, color pencils and color crayons are very similar. We've already practiced that technique before, but we really haven't gotten too much into the watercolor, so I wanted to dive a little bit more into that. So if you guys have any questions or concerns or anything that you guys would like to talk to me about, please let me know in the chat, what I'm talking about. Email me or come and see me during office hours at 2 o'clock. If you have any questions, I will be there. I will see you guys later. Hope this helped. I will also be coming back and covering the color unit academic vocabulary because I haven't done that yet. I apologize. It's been so late. And I will be doing the color wheel for you as well. I'll be posting those tomorrow. So if you have any questions, feel free to dive in and send me an email or see me in office hours at 2 o'clock to 3. I will see you guys later. Have a fabulous day. Bye.